The diagnosis. The sterile white walls of the medical bay hummed softly with the faint sound of alien machinery. Dr. Vralik, a tall, slender figure with bioluminescent markings running down his arms, moved with deliberate grace as he studied the glowing display in front of him. His large, oval-shaped eyes were locked onto the results of the latest scans. The subject was human, a species that had only recently made its way into the interstellar stage. Fragile, short-lived, and prone to violence, those were the common descriptors used in the Galverian medical archives. Yet here, in the heart of the Rivalis medical station, orbiting a distant moon on the edge of explored space, Dr. Vralik was facing something that no Galverian had ever encountered before. The disease, a virulent form of nanoparasitic degeneration, was known to be incurable. In fact, in all recorded cases, the infection always resulted in a slow, agonizing decay of the nervous system, followed by inevitable death. The subject, a human engineer named Lieutenant Mark Davis, had contracted the disease during an away mission in one of the unexplored sectors. Dr. Vralik? A voice interrupted. It was Nurse Seltra, her voice soft but tinged with concern. Her bright blue eyes glanced at the human lying motionless on the biobed. The human was wrapped in medical monitors and diagnostic cables, the soft beeping of the machines the only sound in the room. His face, pale and drawn, seemed peaceful in its unconscious state, but the data from his vitals painted a different picture. The infection had reached an advanced stage. According to the charts, Davis had less than 48 hours to live. What do the scans show? Seltra asked cautiously, although she already knew the answer. Progression, faster than expected, Vralik muttered, shaking his head. His multi-jointed fingers tapped against the console as new lines of code appeared, analyzing the spread of the infection. There's no known cure. This is beyond anything our medical technology can reverse. Then, he's dying? Seltra's voice was softer now, almost a whisper. Despite the countless species she had cared for, the idea of witnessing a death that was not just inevitable but unpreventable made her stomach turn. Vralik straightened, his eyes narrowing in a mixture of frustration and curiosity. For all intents and purposes, yes, this disease has never been defeated by any known biological immune response, let alone one as primitive as a human's. Seltra nodded solemnly and turned her gaze back to the human. She had heard stories about their resilience, how they survived in hostile environments and fought through wars that would decimate most species. But this was different. No amount of willpower or physical toughness could save him now. But just as she was about to suggest administering pain suppressants to ease Davis's final hours, something unexpected happened. A faint spike in his neural activity. Wait, Vralik's eyes widened as he leaned closer to the console, analyzing the new data. The infection was still rampant, but the human's brain had started producing a series of strange signals, almost like a surge of energy through his nervous system. The machines beeped erratically as Davis's heart rate increased slightly, his vitals shifting unpredictably. Is that normal? Seltra asked, stepping closer to the bed. No, far from it. Vralik was already pulling up a new set of diagnostics. The brainwave patterns were unlike anything he had ever seen. Something was happening inside the human's body, something that defied explanation. What is this? He murmured under his breath. Seltra stepped forward, placing her hand gently on the human's wrist. The skin was still cold, but there was a new kind of energy pulsing underneath, a warmth spreading. And then, the impossible happened. The disease, the parasitic nanobots that had been consuming Davis's cells, began to disintegrate, right before their eyes. The infection was reversing itself. Dr. Vralik, the scans, they're showing regeneration. Seltra's voice was filled with disbelief as she pointed at the display. Vralik could only stare at the screen in shock. The human's immune system, far more basic than that of the Galverians, had somehow triggered a response that was dismantling the disease on a cellular level. The nanobots were being neutralized, their destructive patterns unraveling as Davis's body fought back in ways no one had anticipated. That's impossible, Vralik muttered, his voice trembling with shock. He had seen countless species fall to this disease. It was incurable, it was unstoppable. Yet here, a human, a species thought to be medically inferior, was defying the natural order. The unbelievable recovery. The medical bay buzzed with activity as news of the human's miraculous recovery spread through the Rivalis medical station. Doctors, researchers, and scientists of various species gathered around the biobed, their faces etched with disbelief. Mark Davis, The human who had been given mere hours to live, now lay breathing steadily, his vitals stabilizing in ways that should have been biologically impossible. Dr. Vralik stood at the head of the bed, his usually composed demeanor shattered as he scanned the human's body once again. The nanoparasitic disease, which had ravaged Davis's system only hours ago, was nearly gone. The infection markers on the display had all but disappeared, leaving behind a bewildering wave of data that no one could make sense of. "How is this happening?" one of the junior researchers muttered, eyes wide as she tapped furiously at her datapad. "We've never seen an immune response like this, not from any species, let alone a human. Has the disease mutated? Perhaps it's a strain that only appears to mimic the original symptoms," another scientist suggested, his voice tight with desperation, grasping for an explanation. "That's not a mutation," Vralik snapped, his voice unusually sharp. He glared at the screens, as if the data itself were mocking him. "The infection is collapsing. The human's immune system is actively attacking the nanobots. Somehow, it's identifying and destroying them." Nurse Seltra stood quietly beside Davis's bed, her eyes tracing the lines of his now peaceful face. "Could this be some kind of genetic anomaly?" she asked softly. "Maybe this particular human has an ability we've never documented before." Vralik shook his head. "It's not just one anomaly. Look at the data." He waved his hand toward the floating holographic display, showing the neural activity from Davis's brain. His entire body went into a state of hyperdrive, every system working at peak efficiency. "But it doesn't make sense. Humans aren't known for this kind of biological response." As the minutes passed, the gathered medics grew more baffled. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, a mix of awe and fear as they tried to comprehend what was unfolding in front of them. This was a new frontier of medicine, and none of them were prepared for it. Suddenly, a low groan filled the air. All eyes turned toward the human. Lieutenant Mark Davis's eyes fluttered open, his expression groggy and disoriented. He squinted at the bright lights overhead before turning his head slightly, blinking as if trying to recall where he was. "Where am I?" His voice was raspy, his throat dry from the days of unconsciousness. Vralik stepped forward cautiously, as though approaching a wild animal. "You're in the Rivalis Medical Station, Lieutenant Davis. How are you feeling?" Davis blinked again, trying to sit up before Seltra gently pressed him back down. "I don't know. Tired. Sore," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "Last thing I remember is the mission." Then everything went black. "You were infected with a highly advanced nanoparasitic disease," Vralik said, his voice carefully measured. "It should have killed you, but it seems your body has managed to overcome it." Davis frowned. "Overcome it? What do you mean?" Vralik exchanged a glance with Seltra before answering. "Your immune system. It did something we've never seen before. You fought off an incurable disease." For a moment, Davis said nothing, his mind still groggy from his long ordeal. "Are you saying I'm cured?" "Not just cured," Seltra said, her voice a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "You healed overnight. The infection is gone." The human stared at them, processing the information. "That doesn't sound right. I don't even feel sick. I should be dead, shouldn't I?" "By all known medical standards, yes," Vralik replied, his voice heavy with bewilderment. "But somehow, you aren't." Davis shook his head slowly, trying to make sense of it all. "So, what happens now? Do I just go back to work?" Vralik stepped closer, his gaze intense. "This isn't something we can just move past, Lieutenant. Your body has done something unprecedented. We need to understand how this happened. It could change everything we know about disease, about humans, about medicine." "I'm just an engineer," Davis said, his brow furrowed. "I don't know how this happened. I'm no doctor." "Perhaps not," Vralik said, "but your body may hold the key to curing not just this disease, but many others." Davis hesitated, his eyes shifting between the alien faces surrounding him. "I'm not some lab experiment," he muttered, his voice growing firmer. Vralik held up a hand. "We're not suggesting that, but understand, Lieutenant Davis, what happened here is extraordinary. If we can replicate whatever your body did, we could save countless lives. We must study this further." A heavy silence fell over the room. Davis could feel the weight of their words sinking in. He was just a human, a simple engineer, not a hero or some miracle worker. But now, it seemed he had become something far more. His own body, in defiance of all logic, had done the impossible. "What exactly do you need from me?" Davis asked. though part of him already knew the answer. "We need your cooperation for further tests," Vralik said, his voice steady. "Nothing invasive, I assure you, but we must understand what makes you different." As Davis leaned back into the bed, his thoughts raced. This wasn't what he had signed up for, but the idea that he might be part of something bigger, something that could change the future for millions, began to sink in. "All right," he finally said, his voice resigned but determined. "Do your tests." The experiment begins. Days had passed since Lieutenant Mark Davis's miraculous recovery, and the Rivalis Medical Station had transformed into a hub of frenetic activity. Alien doctors, geneticists, and researchers from multiple worlds were now arriving, each hoping to witness and contribute to the groundbreaking study of the human who had defied the incurable disease. Davis found himself in a high-tech research lab, surrounded by machines that hummed and pulsed with strange, alien energy. Despite the wonder of advanced technology all around him, there was a strange sense of isolation. Most of the researchers seemed to view him more as an anomaly to be studied than as a person. Yet, there was no malice in their gaze, only an insatiable curiosity. Dr. Vralik, the lead researcher on the project, stood beside a holographic screen, his hands moving swiftly as he compiled a series of data points. The room was sterile and pristine, with smooth metallic walls lined with advanced medical equipment that had been specifically calibrated for the upcoming tests. "Lieutenant Davis," Vralik began, looking up from the screen, "we're about to begin the first phase of our investigation. Your cooperation could be vital not just to understanding your recovery, but to finding cures for other sentient species across the galaxy." Davis shifted uncomfortably in the chair where he had been seated for the past hour, a tangle of sensors and wires connecting him to several large machines. He wasn't sure if it was nerves or frustration that made his hands twitch slightly. "I get it, Doc," Davis replied, his voice gruff. "I'm not against helping, but I didn't ask for this miracle. I'm just a regular guy who happened to get lucky." "Luck?" Vralik arched one of his large brows, clearly unconvinced. "I don't believe in luck when it comes to medical science. Something inside you triggered this response, a biological defense we've never seen before. There's more to this than chance." Davis didn't argue. He knew the doctor was right, though he didn't understand it any better than they did. His mind wandered back to the mission where it all started, the dark, uncharted planet where he had first been infected. Suddenly, the door to the lab slid open with a soft hiss, and Nurse Seltra entered, her steps quiet but purposeful. In her hands, she carried a small device that glowed faintly with a soft blue light. She offered Davis a reassuring smile, the only member of the crew who seemed to remember he was more than just a case study. "We're ready to proceed with the neural analysis," Seltra said, handing the device to Vralik. "This should help map out any unusual brain activity during your recovery." "Neural analysis?" Davis asked, raising an eyebrow. "Is that some kind of alien MRI?" "Something like that," Vralik replied. "We need to observe the specific changes in your brain patterns during the recovery process. Your neural signals exhibited an anomaly during the height of the infection, a surge in activity we've never seen in any species before. We need to find out why." Davis sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. "Fine, but no brain scrambling. All right, I need this thing in one piece." Seltra chuckled softly, and even Vralik's stern expression softened slightly. "I assure you, Lieutenant, your brain is in no danger." The machine whirred to life as Vralik connected the device to Davis's temple, and immediately, a web of holographic data appeared above the console. The human's brain activity lit up like a star map, with intricate patterns and signals flashing across the display. For a moment, the room was silent as the doctors and scientists studied the data. Vralik's eyes narrowed, his fingers flying across the console as he zoomed in on one particular area, a section of Davis's brain that was pulsing with faint but unmistakable energy. "Fascinating," Vralik murmured, his gaze fixated on the anomaly. "This region of the brain responsible for neural regeneration is far more active than it should be." "Is that bad?" Davis asked, glancing between the doctor and the floating data. "Not bad," Vralik replied, still deep in concentration. "Just unexpected. It seems your body triggered some kind of hyper-regenerative response, but it's not simply biological. There's a neurochemical component here that we don't fully understand. Your brain essentially rewired itself in response to the disease." Davis frowned. "Are you saying my brain fixed my body?" "In a way, yes," Vralik said, his voice filled with awe. "But what's even more remarkable is that your brain didn't just heal you, it adapted. This is far beyond human physiology as we understand it. It's almost as if your body recognized the threat and evolved to counter it. Seltra stepped closer, her eyes scanning the data. This kind of evolution would take thousands of years for most species, but for some reason, it happened to you in a matter of hours. Davis leaned back, processing the information. So what does that mean? Am I some kind of mutant now? Mutant is an imprecise term, Vralik said, but it's possible that this response could be something unique to your genetic makeup. We'll need to conduct further tests specifically to see if this hyper-regenerative ability can be replicated. Davis's jaw clenched. You want to see if this can work on other people, on other humans. Not just humans, Vralik corrected. This could be the key to curing a range of diseases across multiple species. Imagine the lives we could save if we understood how your body triggered this response. The potential is limitless. The room grew quiet as the weight of those words settled over them. Davis stared at the holographic display of his own brain, his thoughts racing. He wasn't a hero, he was just an engineer who happened to survive something impossible. And now, they were talking about using him to unlock the secrets of life and death. All right, Davis said finally, his voice steady. Run your tests, but promise me one thing. Vralik looked up, his alien eyes studying the human. What is it? Promise me you won't turn this into some kind of experiment that only benefits the rich or the powerful, Davis said, his voice firm. If this can help people, if it can save lives, make sure it's for everyone, no matter where they come from. Vralik nodded slowly. I give you my word, Lieutenant Davis. Our mission is to save lives, nothing more, nothing less. Davis leaned back in the chair, the tension in his body easing just slightly. All right, Doc, let's see what we can do. As the machines continued to hum and the data streamed across the consoles, the weight of Davis's decision settled over the room. He had become more than just a survivor. He was now part of something much larger, a discovery that could change the future of medicine across the galaxy. But in the back of his mind, Davis couldn't help but wonder what this new ability would mean for him and for humanity. Beyond human limits, in the days that followed, Lieutenant Mark Davis underwent countless tests. The medical teams, composed of a wide variety of alien specialists, worked tirelessly to uncover the secrets hidden within his biology. Machines far beyond human technology scanned every cell, every neural pathway, and every gene. Despite the constant prodding and poking, Davis remained cooperative, though his patience was beginning to wear thin. He spent most of his days confined to the research wing of the Rivalis Medical Station, a sleek and sterile environment that buzzed with activity. Every now and then, he'd catch glimpses of other patients, various alien species afflicted with all manners of incurable diseases, but his interactions were minimal. The scientists kept him mostly isolated, a precaution to prevent any outside variables from interfering with their study. It was during one such quiet moment that Seltra, the ever-attentive nurse, entered the room. Her soft steps were always a welcome break from the clinical atmosphere. She approached Davis, a small smile on her lips, carrying a tablet in hand. How are you holding up, Lieutenant? She asked, her voice carrying genuine concern. Davis, who had been staring out of the observation window at the stars beyond, sighed and rubbed his temples. I've been better. All this testing is starting to feel like I'm back in basic training. Only, this time, I'm the test subject. Seltra nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. I know it's overwhelming, but you're handling it better than most would. You're making history, Mark. He glanced at her, appreciating the use of his first name. Yeah, well, history feels a lot more exhausting than they make it look in the movies. She chuckled softly and handed him the tablet. Dr. Vralik wanted you to see this. It's a summary of your latest scans. They've made some new breakthroughs. Davis raised an eyebrow as he took the tablet and scrolled through the data. Even though most of it was filled with technical jargon, the graphs and diagrams were clear enough. His brain activity had stabilized, but there was still something strange, an anomaly in his neural responses that hadn't existed before. What's this? He asked, pointing to the strange waveforms. Seltra stepped closer, looking over his shoulder. That's what they've been focused on for the last few days. It's some kind of residual energy, something your brain is producing in small bursts. Vralik thinks it might be linked to your recovery, but we're not sure yet. Davis frowned, staring at the waveforms. Residual energy? You mean like electricity or something? Not exactly, Seltra said, biting her lip. It's more complex. It's like your brain is emitting signals that we've never seen before, something that doesn't match any known neuroelectric patterns. Davis set the tablet down, his unease growing. So, what does that mean? Am I going to start glowing in the dark or something? Seltra gave a small smile. Not quite, but it's definitely unique. Whatever your brain did to fight off the disease, it didn't just fix you, it changed you. Changed me how? Davis's voice was sharp now, and he could feel the tension rising in his chest. We're still figuring that out, she replied, but there's no indication that it's harmful. If anything, it might be the key to helping others. Davis leaned back, running a hand through his hair. The idea of being changed wasn't exactly comforting. He had come to terms with being the subject of some grand medical experiment, but this was different. If his brain was doing things it wasn't supposed to, what did that mean for his future? What did it mean for his humanity? Before he could voice his concerns, the door slid open, and Dr. Vralik entered, his long, graceful strides carrying him to Davis's bedside. Lieutenant Davis, Vralik began, his voice more energized than usual. We've just finished analyzing the latest data. Your neuroregenerative abilities, they're even more advanced than we initially thought. Davis's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means, Vralik continued, that your brain has developed a capacity to repair not just your body, but itself. The energy we've detected, these waveforms, are a sign that your brain has entered a new state of functionality. It's more resilient, more adaptive than anything we've seen before. You're saying my brain evolved, Davis said flatly. In a sense, yes, Vralik agreed, but more than that, it's evolved in response to an external threat, the disease. Your brain isn't just repairing damage, it's actively enhancing your body's ability to survive. Davis sat up straighter, a sinking feeling settling in his gut. And you're sure this isn't dangerous? Vralik shook his head. No signs of danger so far. If anything, your body is operating at a higher efficiency than any human we've ever encountered. But we need to run further tests. Of course you do, Davis muttered under his breath. But Vralik wasn't finished. There's something else you need to know. We've taken a closer look at the disease you were infected with. It's unlike any known nanoparasitic strain. It's adaptive. It was designed to overcome advanced biological defenses, meaning your body wasn't supposed to win. Davis's eyes widened. Designed? You mean it wasn't natural? Vralik nodded gravely. Exactly. This disease wasn't random, Lieutenant. It was engineered, likely by a species far more advanced than either of ours. Whoever created it intended for it to be a perfect killer. A heavy silence settled over the room as the implications of Vralik's words sank in. Davis had been infected by something far more dangerous than a simple disease. It was a weapon, one that was meant to annihilate. But somehow, Vralik continued, his voice tinged with wonder, your body adapted faster than the disease could spread. It's as if your biology outpaced the infection's ability to adapt. We've never seen anything like it. Davis's heart pounded in his chest. So, what now? What happens next? Vralik's eyes gleamed with purpose. We need to understand how your body did this, and more importantly, we need to find out where this disease came from. If there are others out there with this kind of technology, they could be preparing for something much larger. Davis nodded slowly, the weight of this new reality pressing down on him. He had survived the impossible, but now it seemed he had stumbled into something far more dangerous, something that threatened not just him, but possibly the entire galaxy. All right, Doc, he said, his voice steady. What do we do next? Vralik met his gaze, his expression one of determination. We find out who's behind this, and we stop them before it's too late. The final revelation, the Rivalis medical station was no longer just a hub of curiosity. It had transformed into a fortress of caution and preparation. Word had spread about Lieutenant Mark Davis and the disease that had almost claimed his life, a disease that was not merely an infection but a weapon designed by an unknown, possibly hostile, alien species. In the days since the revelation, Davis had been restless. The endless tests had only confirmed what Dr. Vralik suspected, his body had somehow out-evolved the threat. But the bigger question remained, who had created this weapon, and why? The medical bay was unusually quiet as Davis sat alone in his quarters, staring out at the vast expanse of stars. The weight of his transformation, of what he had become, gnawed at him. He wasn't just a human anymore. His body had changed, adapted in ways that even the most advanced minds couldn't fully comprehend. The strange energy his brain now produced was still a mystery, but it wasn't harmful, at least, not yet. A soft knock at the door broke his train of thought. It slid open to reveal Dr. Vralik and Nurse Seltra, both with expressions of grim determination. Davis gestured for them to enter, sensing that something significant had shifted. Davis, Vralik began, his voice lower than usual. We've found the source. Davis straightened, the tension in his muscles coiled tight. The source of the disease? Vralik nodded and motioned toward the console embedded in the wall. A holographic display flickered to life, showing a distant star system, one on the very edges of explored space. It's called Urazel Prime, Vralik continued, his fingers gliding over the controls as he zoomed in on the planet. Our long-range scans detected anomalous activity there, matching the energy signature of the nanoparasitic strain you were infected with. Davis leaned forward, studying the display. The planet was a barren, rocky world with no known civilizations, just a wasteland of storms and desolation. That place doesn't look like much of a threat, Davis muttered. Seltra, standing beside Vralik, spoke up. We think it's a staging ground. If this disease is a weapon, then Urazel Prime could be where it was developed, either by an advanced species or some kind of automated facility. Davis clenched his fists. So, what's the plan? We just sit here and wait for them to launch their next attack? No, Vralik replied, his eyes sharp. We're going to take the fight to them. We need to understand how they created this disease and what their true intentions are. Davis stood, his mind racing. I assume you'll need me to come along. Vralik hesitated for a moment before answering. You're the only one who survived this infection. If we encounter more of it, you might be our best chance at neutralizing it, but we won't force you. Davis stared at the planet on the display, his jaw clenched. He had been an engineer, a soldier, but now, he was something more. His survival had unlocked a mystery that threatened the galaxy, and he couldn't just stand by while others fought this battle. I'm in, Davis said firmly, but if this is a fight, I want to be ready. Vralik exchanged a glance with Seltra before nodding. We've already prepared. You'll have the best equipment, the best defenses, but this isn't just a battle, Lieutenant Davis. We're stepping into the unknown. The journey to Urazel Prime. The Rivalis expedition left the station 2 days later, traveling on a sleek reconnaissance vessel outfitted with advanced defensive systems and a small team of experts. Davis found himself suited in combat gear, not unlike what he'd worn during his years as a military engineer, but this time enhanced with alien technology, a sign of how far things had escalated since his recovery. As they neared Urazel Prime, the atmosphere aboard the ship was tense. Vralik and Seltra worked tirelessly with the crew, analyzing incoming data, scanning the planet for signs of life or potential threats, but as they drew closer, what they found was more disturbing than anything they had anticipated. There's no life here, Vralik said, staring at the readings. Just ruins. Whatever created this disease, it's gone. Gone? Davis echoed, feeling a sinking pit in his stomach. So what? The threat's over? Seltra shook her head, her expression grim. No, this place, it's a graveyard. The technology used to create the disease is still active, but there's no sign of any living beings. Whatever made this weapon must have left long ago. As the team landed on the surface of Urazel Prime, Davis felt the desolation of the world seep into his bones. The winds howled through the shattered ruins of what must have once been a great city, now reduced to rubble and dust, but beneath the surface, the remnants of the facility still hummed with power. The team descended into the underground complex, their lights casting eerie shadows on the ancient machinery that lined the walls. It wasn't long before they found the central control hub, an array of alien technology unlike anything they had ever seen. This is it, Vralik said, his voice filled with awe and dread. This is where it all started. Davis approached the main console, his hand hovering over the controls. Can we shut it down? More than that, Vralik replied. We can destroy it. We just need to trigger the overload sequence. But before they could initiate the process, a warning flashed across the console. The system had detected their presence, and it began to reactivate. Get back, Vralik shouted as the ancient machinery roared to life. The lights flickered, and the air crackled with energy. Suddenly, the room was filled with a swarm of nanobots, the same kind that had nearly killed Davis. They moved like a living cloud, surging toward the team. Davis's heart raced, but something inside him, something new, reacted. His brain pulsed with the strange energy that had saved him before, and as the swarm approached, it stopped, hesitating as if it recognized him. Without thinking, Davis stepped forward, his mind focused on the swarm. He could feel the energy in his body responding, pushing back against the nanobots. Slowly, the swarm began to dissolve, disintegrating into nothingness. The room fell silent. "It's over," Vralik whispered, astonished. "You've neutralized them." Davis exhaled, his body trembling with the effort. "Not over yet. We need to destroy this place for good." Working together, the team triggered the overload, and the facility began to collapse around them. They raced back to the surface as explosions echoed through the ruins, and moments later, Urizel Prime was consumed in a massive explosion, wiping out the last remnants of the deadly weapon. The aftermath. Back aboard the ship, Davis stood by the observation window, watching as the desolate planet faded into the distance. He had faced death, survived the impossible, and now, he had helped prevent a galaxy-wide catastrophe. "Thank you," Vralik said, standing beside him. "What you've done, what you've become, it's something none of us could have predicted." Davis nodded, though his thoughts were elsewhere. "I didn't ask for this, Doc, but if my body can help stop something like that from happening again, I'm ready." Vralik smiled. "You may be more than human now, Lieutenant, but you're still as resilient as ever." As the stars stretched out before them, Davis knew that his journey was far from over. He had faced the unknown and emerged stronger. Whatever came next, he was ready to face it head-on. After all, he was human, and humanity had always thrived in the face of impossible odds.